Okay. So as I said, I'm Nat Decker, and I'm going to start with an image description, which is a practice in these types of live events where I can describe what I look like visually to model. I'm a white non-binary person. I have short hair with like bleached ends, but long grown out dark roots. I have a chain star necklace, a gray shirt on. I'm in my bedroom next to a stack of books. My bed is behind my cat has been popping in and out. And this is a useful strategy for if somebody's not able to see the Zoom experience. Maybe that is because of visual disability. Maybe that's because of, being in the car on the way somewhere, maybe dropping kids off, maybe having low internet bandwidth. So um, this can be like a practice that can be integrated into how you're navigating these kinds of Zoom spaces. Um, and then just to introduce myself a little bit more, I'm an artist and I'm also a community organizer and access worker. And I'm working in the like field of like crip arts and then also like working with technology a lot with a lot of criticality. And I'm working between like digital media and sculpture primarily, and have been using the mobility device as like a formal object that has been like a site of a lot of interesting dualities in the way that it's like something that is like freedom giving, yet is like sort of burdened with a lot of stigmas around perceptions of disability, sterility of disability, and making these like mobility device objects that are kind of these like non-functional devices that are bringing in sort of like more expansive aesthetics, and then this like acting as a commentary on like the functional object and like usefulness and designations of usefulness that I can like translate to how we're thinking about the disabled body as like a laborer, as like, fitting into paradigms of value within capitalism. And I have a collective in which I'm doing a lot of work kind of archiving representations of disability within like 3D and computer graphics, and thinking a lot about just expressions of disability within the simulation. And then yeah, the last some years have been doing consulting and different research around accessibility specifically, and that is something I arrived at through like a lot of lived experience of self-advocacy around accommodation and access needs, and then like being a student organizer with disabled advocacy, and then working, yeah, just like with different arts organizations I've been interacting with to provide just like whatever insights and research I can. And we can get into it. So I saw that you were shared the access guide, which I think is a really fantastic start to think about like what is access in terms of a list of like different, and we can look at this together. I know you've looked at this, but this is like a really great resource of different kind of practical strategies that relate to access, and specifically within the context of the web, which is very relevant to like the expertise of this group. And so this can mean like many different things, be it like content warnings around like strobe, having like just like ways to promote like kind of comprehension and clarity of media, and then things like how to caption video, how to have audio description for video, how to ensure that like the the semantics of the like HTML, the website that you're creating are going to be something that's like legible for a screen reader. So I'm not going to get so much into all of the different strategies, because this is sort of just like one dimension of how I want us to think about access today. But, you know, I encourage you to like dig into this resource. And then there's also like a whole wealth of other resources, and I can share some of those too if it's helpful, that exist on the web of how to like approach the practical strategies. But also just want to think about access as go back to presenting as like an act of community care, and as like a practice of interdependence, and something that like these are strategies that can kind of be acting as this sort of retrofit for like uh, a paradigm in which there's already these like instances of like friction around access, of barriers, of like a lack of integration into thought of like all different needs and abilities from the foundation. And there's like a tension there of like just trying to like retroactively fix. And I think that what I'm thinking about access work as this active community care and interdependence is also not to obfuscate the need to have like contending with these the structural alignments that have like led to these barriers to begin with, the ways in which certain people, certain bodies, minds, the ways that like this is intersecting with race and gender, and the way that that is like this pointing to a flawed system of supremacy that shapes our like the way we're interacting spatially, politically. So just wanting to like stay really grounded in that. And then you know, acknowledging too like the way we're interacting with access and the sort of buzz around the phrase and the language as well, and especially like as something that very usefully like sort of emerged out of you know, having like a global pandemic, a health crisis, the way that we transition to these different modes um of like being in space together. And but just the ways that's also produced some tension in how yeah, like how it is getting discussed, is getting brought into these like certain market spaces, and just wanting to push back on the like way that in like the way it gets discussed in tech spaces occasionally can be around like how to create a bigger either labor force or a bigger like pool of like marketability and consumer, and wanting to just like stay grounded in access work that is rooted in disability justice. And let me just skip to the disability justice principles, and looking at like the historics of how our ideas around access have emerged, like being born from a framework of disability rights, which is very much connected to the sort of like economic politics of disability. And you know, the ADA being this legislation that was confronting these barriers, but very much within the paradigm of how to produce like economic citizenship, and how to ensure that disabled people are able to participate in capitalism fully, are able to like enter the job market. And there's been this you know, like emergence of the idea of disability justice, which is something that has been produced by particularly like queer disabled people of color, and is a like sort of new emergence of this work, which is centering the voices of the most marginalized, and is really attempting to contend with capitalism and the way that capitalism is like very intertwined with ableism. So yeah, I'm probably like maybe you're already familiar with these 10 principles of disability justice, but this is something I also just want us to stay grounded in, and in how we're thinking about access, and particularly thinking about intersectionality, leadership of the most impacted, as mentioned, this like anti-capitalist politic, and the commitment to cross-movement organizing, which I think is especially important when thinking about accessibility and trying to kind of fold in as many like different needs and different community needs as possible, and how we're contending with barriers. Um, and then want to point to as well, like this, I really like this definition from Talila Lewis offers of ableism. So if we're thinking about the work of disability justice, access work being this community care that is contending with ableism, this definition of ableism is a system of assigning value to people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, productivity, desirability, intelligence, excellence, and fitness. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in eugenics, anti-Blackness, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. This systemic oppression leads to people in society determining people's values based on their culture, age, language, appearance, religion, birth, or living place, health, wellness, and/or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. And I think that last point is really valuable, and trying to like sometimes just like sit with the complexity and sort of trouble language and the like designations of disability. And if we go back to this first slide and just looking at just sort of the like unidimensional like aura of like the energy that like this symbol has as being something that is, you know, sort of pointing towards just the like, and it's like the trouble with like iconography and like symbols and trying to capture like a lot of complex ideas with one like sort of universal um visual element. But you know, this is pointing to like maybe one type of like mobility disability. It's like a very sort of like static image, and there is like a project to redesign this logo as something that demonstrates a little bit more like autonomy, and like the ability of like a chair user to be like pushing themselves and more in motion, instead of this sort of like rigid, sort of like medicalized static form. But really pointing to the way that there's like if we're talking about access, it's going to be something that is a lot broader, capturing a lot more you know, forms of disability, but also just thinking about not just disablement, but just the ways that people are experiencing ableism, ways people are having barriers to their own capacity limited based on um different beer. I'm trying to check the chat. um so yeah, sitting with the problematics of that, sitting with this like definition of ableism. And then I really want to point to the work of Amy Hamraoui, who has sort of designed this field of critical access studies, which engages with the methodologies, epistemologies, and political commitments of accessibility from the perspectives of disability justice and disability culture. We can just kind of look at their website for a moment. But I think this idea of critical access studies is important because it's not just looking at inclusion and the idea of assimilation, but it's thinking about thinking critically about like who gets to be defined as, for example, a disabled user. And that's looking at the sort of historics of disability rights movement that have been largely about maintaining whiteness of like a white disabled middle class as laborers, looking at intersectionality, looking at just the different like strategies of how we're understanding, yeah, those like designations, understanding what access means. So I encourage you to check out Amy. Amy has this incredible book that I made a folder I'm going to share with all of you that includes this book and then a few other readings. But then want to get into present one more time. Oh, and just one more little provocation. I want to share this concept by Liz Jackson, the disability dongle, which I think is really important for people working with technology. But this is the idea of a well-intended, elegant, yet useless solution to a problem we never knew we had. They're most often conceived and created in like design schools. And so that's thinking about kind of like the way access will be sort of exploited and used within these like design spaces or maybe hackathons and creating these tools that are actually like not in touch with the actual community needs and are often like really utilizing like high tech in the like sort of forefronts of like what we see as like technological innovation to create solutions that are like not contending with like basic needs and the issues of basic needs and not contending with the like actual like experiential needs of disabled community of people with those needs. But with that, I thought that we could build off of the I with some of the people in this call, we were at the Open Source Arts Contributors Conference the last 2 years in December and had, or in spring, I mean, and had some in Denver in spring and had some discussion around these different categories, subcategories of access. So one of which being accessible open source software, web accessibility, data sovereignty and community access, and then creative access. And just to briefly discuss these different groups, I thought we could I think that if we wanted to get into breakouts to discuss these different subcategories, but then also I want to leave everyone with the question of just like, what are you doing to make your fellowship project accessible? What can you do more of? Why is that important? What ideas you have for how you can push that even further. But then I thought if it is like, yeah, if this lines up with what people are wanting, I thought we could split into these 4 different breakout rooms and then accessible open source software. I think that can be thinking a lot about, how open source software community can create access to provide an opportunity for communities who are historically excluded, especially thinking about non-Western focused software, things like translation, web accessibility. There's a lot of these sort of practical strategies, namely like what you've seen listed in that access guide. Thinking about data sovereignty and community access, I think is especially important, thinking about the tensions of wanting to have open access, but also the needs, especially, looking at what the needs that have been addressed from like Indigenous perspective and community to have community protection and to sort of like have the importance of certain like community like gatekeeping and like having space of alignment and solidarity. And then creative access, thinking about the ways that accessibility can be like a creative medium, the way that it can expand like the potential of like a creative project can add new dimensions, the poetics of access within a creative context.
So it seems like there was three groups that ended up being like the big groups. The next voluntelling group is data sovereignty and community access. Folks want to share from that group.
I was voluntold to share in the group, so I'll do it. Um, we opened by thinking about data being gathered and what happens, who controls, and how that data is moved and accessed. And that opened us up into thinking about what that can do to people's ability to process that information. And if there's too much openness or too much information, it can be flipped as a means of obfuscating what people take away from these kind of processes of data collection. Um, and that also led us to thinking about how people access information in consent forms or community agreements or syllabi, things that people are supposed to be able to access in order to know the context of the information that they're sharing or that is being shared with them. But if there's, again, too much, it's a wall of text, it limits access and it limits people's ability sometimes to process that information. And that opened us up to discussion around frustrations and challenges in crafting these things, in being the producers of these things, and then having a tension between the people who are supposed to benefit from it or make use of it and the people trying to create it. And then also this strange dynamic of a syllabus or a consent form or a term of service being crafted for lawyers or for institutions or for other professors instead of for students or users or people that are supposed to be given an understanding of what's happening. And I think yeah, that was my main read of and what I wrote down. If anyone else wants to grab some time um to mention some stuff, I don't think I captured everything.
Well, you got an A+, so
Oh, sweet.
looking good. It's a lot of good scoring in the chat. Okay. If there's nothing else, then I'll move along to the next group. Thank
There
you.
were two other things that I think we talked about. One was how the more information you provide about how the data is going to be used, the more like it could inspire like fear like in people that their
Mm.
data is being collected, even though like the purpose of being like very transparent with people maybe to increase trust. It could like backfire because they're like, whoa, what's all this? I don't usually see all this. But the reason like people don't usually see all, or you might not get all that is because people are not being as transparent. But anyway, that like tension of things like backfiring, and then also the tension of when you open up a document so it can be changed, like a syllabus, uh that can also be tricky because then people may the transparency might involve putting track changes on things. Otherwise there's it the trick there's something tricky about things being able to be changed, but people not knowing that they're being changed, and then the frustration or fear around like things changing without you knowing it. So then, yeah, just so we talked about that as like another tension point of like wanting to be very open and for things to be able to be changed, but then also needing to keep track of those changes in a transparent way so people know the changes are happening. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, y'all got really into it. There's a lot of fun branches of tension. I apologize. Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing out. And we're going to move on to our last group, accessible open source software. If anyone was voluntold or wants to volunteer, this is your moment.
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of accessible open source software, we focused mostly on discussion around how to make it more accessible for anyone to contribute to open source software, because typically it's a very like technical process in order, and you have to have a background in technical things to contribute. So we're discussing how could we can make the experience of allowing people to contribute to open source software better, which means like better documentation on like how to navigate like the GitHub um, process of like creating a pull request or contributing, because a lot of times it deters from like more like students who are learning and people who are still learning about how this whole thing works. And Malia gave some really good ways that they've seen in the past, like how that's been taught. Dan Schiffman, for instance, had a video on YouTube about contributing to P5JS, and then also like hosting like in-person like workshops about like how to contribute, and just like making it a kind of like more community-based approach, because like contributing can be very like you don't want to like look dumb or like look like you're doing something wrong or make a mistake or bring something down. Like it's a really intimidating process. So like we're trying to discuss like how can we inspire especially like people who are regular contributors and like educators on like how to create content and stuff, like to make that more accessible. Did I get that right?
You got an A+ and a heart, and Dan Schiffman links popping up in the chat. It's a beautiful day. Thank you so much. Oh, more pluses. A+ for everyone. You win the gold star of Town Hall. Thank you all so much for your generosity, your sharing, your care, your investment, and participating in this deeply, and jumping in. And Nat, do you have any closing thoughts or ways you want to transition us out? Other than me gushing about how much I adore you.
Oh, I'm just gonna share a drive folder. I just threw a few readings in there. I have Amy Hamraoi's book is in there that I just find like so timely and brilliant. But yeah, just a few readings in there if you're interested. And then please just like I'm always happy to chat if anybody wants to reach out and wants to schedule a one-on-one at any point. I'm super down. So, but thank you for the time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Maybe a
Nat.
round of silence or not silent clap and snaps. Amazing. So many gestures, so little time. Raphael, I know you are really on top of our time. We have a 5-minute break, right? Starting now?
That's what we planned for. How's everybody's energy? Would you benefit from a 5-minute break? Yes. Okay. I'm gonna set that up. Yeah, 5 minutes. Take a breather. We'll be back in 5.
Yes, and so we're going to do a very quick closeout because I know we didn't get to say all of our names and pronouns earlier. So as a closeout, you're going to say your name, your pronoun, and just a short what you're taking with you from this time together. It could be like a gratitude. I see some thank yous in the chat already. It could be a question. It could be something specific to your work. And this is just a goodbye or a see you later. So don't take up too much time. But yes, just a quick little thing. And the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna popcorn it. So you're gonna go, and then since we got really into it, you're gonna volunteer someone else. It'll be really fun. So I am going to start and volunteer Rupa because you were smiling so big. So
That's just how my face naturally is. I can't help it. I'm Rupa. I use she, her pronouns. I am part of the fellowship cohort this year. And what I'm taking away is just an appreciation for how wide-ranging conversations on accessibility are in this space and in tangential related spaces, and what could be possible if we centered accessibility as we are working on our projects and building new technologies. And I will popcorn it to Buffy.
Thanks, Rupa. Hi, I'm Buffy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the fellowship cohort this year working on a project that has to do with open source software and sound and transness and archives. I'm really happy to have a lot of the online tools and guides to navigate ways to offer people grounding in their physical space in like geographical, geospatial location that feels like super important. That is super important. I'm also like an accessibility consultant for exhibitions and galleries, so I'm taking some tools to apply directly to those spaces because they are often very physically inaccessible, let alone cognitively. So thank you. I will pass it off to Luis.
Hi, so I'm Luis. My pronouns are he, him. I also want to thank Nat and Sebastian for their amazing presentations. For me, I think what I can think about the subject is a very complex issue. There are always ways to improve our projects, and we should never think accessibility as some final stage of our project. We can always think about new ways, creative ways to make our projects more accessible. So, and also thank you all for our interactions on the chat. It's really insightful to know about all your thoughts on the subject. So thank you.
And you can popcorn it to someone.
Yes, I forgot about this, sorry. I'll popcorn to Ahmad.
Hi, I'm Ahmad. Pronouns are he, him. I'm part of the processing fellowship. Thank you so much, Nat and Sebastian. My takeaway from both of your presentations as well as my breakout room was just that there is just like so much so many like open source initiatives towards like accessibility. Like I'm just like this is like a world that's like really opening up to me, and I'm like glad to just like come from this meeting with just like more like resources to a world that like I'm still like a little unfamiliar to. And yeah, my takeaway is that like with accessibility, especially with accessibility relating to kind of like open source and like computing and like access, like it's so easy to kind of think of it as like the general trend in tech is to kind of like have like solutions that are kind of like assumed to like work like for every situation and case. But like my takeaway is that like these solutions should not be like simple, and they should be human centered, and that like there should be like engaged in continuous dialogue and effort to make accessibility work, and it shouldn't just be like a simple like a centralized solution that like just like ticks the boxes. Like this is like an ongoing conversation and ongoing effort always that like we should be engaged with continuously. And I'll popcorn to David.
Oh, hello. I'm David. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm really grateful for this. It is a like perspective opener in many ways. And I guess my takeaway is sort of reminders about like prior like coming into considerations around design and access with assumptions that like can't be left intact, like sort of realizing that there's some prior I don't know, there's something in my head about like what's there before what we think is there, in terms of what people encounter when they are trying to use any kind of system, and how like whatever considerations the designer has in it, there's something that someone is experiencing that's there before the designer's considerations. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like remembering that you don't have access to what other people don't have access to, maybe is one way of saying it. And that has to be sought, and can't be assumed that you know what's going on. That's what I'll say. I'll popcorn to Dan.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm Dan. I'm part of, I often go by she, her. I'm part of the processing fellowship cohort. Yeah, I was thank everybody for being here for this afternoon and the amazing presentations and discussions. I think the main thing for me from this afternoon is sort of to think about accessibility in a broader context, and maybe in a more holistic sense, I would say, like to open up a lot of different perspectives to me, in that how many areas that are being affected, how many different roles, for instance, from developers, users, and maybe documentation for general public, collaboration, from all these different angles to think about the project and accessibility in general. Yeah, and also with a critical view on that, to mind me of my own bias and yeah, assumptions. And I will popcorn to Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Hi, my name is Anh. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm also a part of Protecting Fellowship, and I feel very honored and happy to be sharing this space with you all today. And thank you, Nat and Sebastian for sharing. I learned a lot from it, and I've been taking notes, so many notes. And I think that my main takeaway here is that we all know accessibility is not one size fits all, and we all need to think from different perspectives. And I really think about my project because I asked a question to Sebastian, and I got so many insights on how complex it is to gather data, and obviously it's a long way to go to actually in action and policy in government. So I'm thinking a lot about it, and that's been really helpful to take away from my project and from my home country, Vietnam. And I think that it inspired a lot in me, and I think that it's valuable, and hopefully we can do this. Um, yeah, so I would like to popcorn to who hasn't talked. Oh, Dora, I would like to popcorn to you.
Hi, I'm Dora. I'm on the Pros Fellowship Grant cohort. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm grateful for all the resources that we got today. The project that I'm working on for Pros is designing and building, prototyping a collaborative editor for processing, which means that like I'm at the very beginning stages of like a brand new project with, and I really appreciate the timing of this workshop, because I get to think about these things before anything is even built. So I think that's like a really great way of like a different way for me to start thinking about accessibility and at the beginning stages of a project rather than at the end. Yeah, I will popcorn to Claudine.
Hi, I'm Claudine. I'm also a PROS grantee. And yeah, I really appreciate the presentations opening up my mind. And I'm really looking forward to digging into the resources. I've clicked on everyone, so I have all these tabs to take a look at. And yeah, I'll be self-reflective on how this impacts my project as well. So thank you so much for opening up my mind. I'll pass it to Nat.
Nat, I'm a mentor for some of the fellows in this cohort, which I'm so excited to get to support. But then again, just want to reiterate that I'm available to everyone if you do want to chat about accessibility or anything. I keep thinking about this UN report that was mentioned and just considering the ways that, yeah, like in these sort of like institutional, large, global, like attempts at objectivity framings of something like disability, just how those are operating with ableism and thinking about a lot about like scale and how we're working in strategies of scale and local specificity, cultural specificity of disability and how that's operating globally. But yeah, I really liked some of the conversation happening in the chat, so I appreciate that. And thank you everyone for your time this morning. Could I pass to Shin?
Yeah, thank you, Nat. I really appreciate this is my first event in this position in the Processing Foundation, and I just like, yeah, I feel so full. It's 9 a.m. right now, and I'm just like, oh wow, this is how I'm starting my day. This is amazing. I really appreciate the nuances that were brought up in these conversations. There was so much there to unpack for me. And thank you all for just like, showing up and giving your contributions and ideas. I think, yeah, two takeaways for me is one is a really good reminder that I think a couple of people have addressed already. Just how can we really kind of like root and work locally while knowing that, in this, special opportunity of fellowship in this limited time frame, there are also opportunities for us to build coalition across different places. What kind of message can we form? What kind of coalition would be productive for people? I think that's something that I'm thinking about. I'm also just like thinking about this kind of like nuance of yeah, the kind of push and pull of like wanting to get things done kind of legislation policy level or infrastructural level versus yeah, just the need to like preserve care and humility that we have for each other in a very communal basis, and how do we kind of like work through that, I guess, over time. So that's just, it's a lot to think about. And so yeah, thank you, Nat. I know Sebastian is no longer here, but also the fellows and Sige and Raphael. This has been really inspiring. I'm going to pass it to, I don't think Dorothy have spoken.
I did, yeah. Thank you.
You did. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. No.
Oh,
you
did.
I feel like I already spoke too much, but I had a lot of thoughts in the chat. And I really liked it's Shin, what you were saying about balancing like kind of, I don't know the exact words you use, but like international or like global like opportunity to speak with you all right now, like in so many different places, and then also the like very local at the same time, which I think this reminded me of, like the fellowship. This is like a unique thing for the fellowship, that to talk to people all over the world about this. And then it also made me think about how disability like studies or critical disability studies or access like tech usability studies or something, like on the one hand we're trying to like create this like global like discourse, but then I also read this book called, I can't remember, I'll find it, but it was like about universal access and the problems with thinking that like there's some sort of universality to like access discussions, because it is actually very cultural and like local and stuff. So this reminded me of like how difficult it is to like speak in an international way about it, and then also about like people's assumptions about like what, like Sebastian's no longer here, but was talking about like people's assumptions about what disability, and was like, well, maybe the assumptions in like where you are from, but the assumptions of the people around me at a local level may be different from the assumptions around you at the local level. But then we have to speak internationally about other people's assumptions so we can like advocate. And that gets complicated, but it's really cool to talk about. And I forgot to mention my pronouns are she, her. And I think Raphael, did you go yet?
I haven't.
Okay.
I don't really need to either, but yeah. So I'm Raphael. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns, and yeah. That I mean, I think a lot of has been said already that I agree with. I think like in particular what Shin you said about the tension between like different approaches to accessibility is something that every time I hear people talk about it who know more than I do about the subject, I realize how complex of a topic it is and how many different perspectives there are. And I think I'm very happy that we got to see like different people coming from different parts of the world, different perspectives, different approaches, different challenges that they're trying to address. And yeah, that's I'm very happy with also everybody's discussions in the chat as well and in person. So yeah, I couldn't have gone better as a first town hall. It's wonderful. I'm looking forward to the next ones, which is the August 24th. That will be our town hall on governance. So we already have one confirmed guest, I think. Not sure about the second, but yeah, we'll keep you posted about that. And Louis, did you talk? Not yet? Yes, you did. Okay. Who hasn't gone? Was I the last one?
It's me.
Oh, Tsige, sorry. Yeah, of course.
Okay, I will close this out. Thank you all so much. Okay, I'm Tsage. I use she, they pronouns. I am so honored to have held this space with all y'all. Thank you for also going over 6 minutes. That's really generous to give 2 hours and 6 minutes of your day. Really appreciate you. We will be sending out, we recorded this, so we're gonna send out a recording if you want to revisit things. We'll also send out the folder that Nat, I'm so sorry. I'm tired. Nat, I know you so well. There's no reason for me to be calling you. Anyways, hold on. I'll be sending out some links and they'll be written down with all of the correct spelling of names and gratitudes. But thank you all so much for participating and being inside of this. This has been great. And I too am really excited for all the ones that are going to come and follow and for more conversations and collaborations. And I just feel like we should all just be chatting and hanging out all day, but you have lives and you deserve to live them. And so please enjoy them. And thank you all so much for spending some time and looking forward to more. But yeah, see you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.